Well, good morning. Let me get organized here. Can I borrow this? Kyle says yes. Sure. Well, I told myself I would do this, and I'm going to do it first so I don't forget, because I will if I get going. But last week, Lonnie came and talked to us, and he closed by talking about our oikos mapping. And he said that he is going to make sure, and he actually didn't ask me, but I was curious. Did anybody do that? Let's raise hands. Let's make it awkward. Did anybody make an oikos map? All right, good. Some of you. That's a start. So here's one of the reasons I was doing that, is because we always talk about this as the foolishness of preaching. At least the Word talks about it as that. And it reminds me that if I don't listen and engage what is being said from the pulpit, I probably shouldn't also then expect that I will be filled with whatever component of that message was promised in the Word. And so one of the things that I think oikos mapping is just a component. It's not necessarily a biblical thing in the way that Lonnie laid it out, but it is a biblical thing in who we are as the church and who we're going to become as the church. And so take advantage of the challenges that come from the pulpit to you to try these things. I've tried thousands of different methods, 12-step programs and things to make myself a better Christian. And you know what? Some of them worked. Some of them actually grew me into a different place. Some of them had me engage something else that caused me to be a better person. So I'm encouraging you today. It might not be oikos mapping, which is nothing weird and strange. It's just making a map of oikos means, in Hebrew, means dwelling. It's your place. Where do you live? Where do you live? Map it out. What's your plan to reach the lost for the kingdom? So that was my plug for Lonnie. This morning I want to ask you a question. And I'm actually going to ask you to answer the question by show of hands. I know that's awkward, because then if you're wrong, the person next to you will. But they'll probably be wrong too, so don't worry about it. Be bold. Are we a people who long for joy? Raise your hand if you believe you are a person who longs for joy. Wait, raise your hand if you long for joy. Good. Okay, put your hands down. Okay. And everyone who didn't raise their hand, raise your hand. And I'm just going to say you're the people who are like, I just don't know. I'm not falling into your trap. It was a trap. I totally tricked you. It's interesting to me how often we long for something that we should already have. Right? This joy thing. If we're truly God's people, we would not be longing for joy. People really only long for something that they don't have. Right? So it's interesting to me, and there are days I long for joy because I don't have it. Am I broken? Okay, good. Oh, how nice. Whenever Alex walking towards the stage, you feel like something might be going wrong. So, as God's people, this joy isn't something that we should be longing for. I was asking myself, I wonder how much of the church's resources we burn up trying to find the very thing that should actually be fueling our mission. Right? Shouldn't joy be the thing that's driving us to do what it is that we're supposed to do as a church? And yet sometimes we come week after week, month after month, trying to find that thing, right? And we dump as a church, we dump our resources into trying to make you happy, trying to get you to church and make you smile. We dump our resources and time and energy into that, and after a while we realize, gosh, we've dumped a lot of energy and resources into getting the very thing that should actually be fueling our mission, which should just reveal to us why sometimes it's so hard to complete the mission. We're running low. Our reserves are low. C.S. Lewis said this, "Our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling around with drink and sex and ambition, when infinite joy is offered to us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in the slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased." Are we not vessels that are designed to hold the presence of God? Like, was that not why we were created in the first place? Is to be a vessel that would carry and hold the image of God? Yet we spend our days trying to fill what could hold oceans using little more than buckets to get the job done. Right? I mean, how often, just like what C.S. Lewis was saying, do we try to do these small little things in hopes to just pour a bucket of joy, a bucket of life, into a vessel that is designed to hold the unfathomable, but just to put it into perspective, oceans. Like, how long would it take for you to fill the ocean with a bucket? Right? It seems like a pointless task. When Spurgeon was riding home one evening after a heavy day's work and feeling very wearied and depressed, the verse, "My grace is sufficient for thee," came to him. He immediately compared himself to a little fish in the Thames, apprehensive lest, drinking so many pints of water in the river each day, it might drink the Thames dry. And hearing Father Thames say to it, "Drink away, little fish, my stream is sufficient for thee." Then he thought of a little mouse in the granaries of Joseph in Egypt, afraid lest it might, by daily consumption of the corn it needed, exhaust the supplies and starve to death. When Joseph came along and, sensing its fear, said, "Cheer up, little mouse, my granaries are sufficient for thee." Or again, he thought of himself as a man climbing some high mountain to reach its lofty summit, and dreading lest he might exhaust all the oxygen in the atmosphere. When the Creator himself said, "Breathe away, O man, and fill thy lungs ever. My atmosphere is sufficient for thee." Then he told his congregation, "For the first time in my life, I experienced what Abraham felt when he fell upon his face and laughed. Joyful experience," he said. It's interesting to me how often we try to use worry to attain joy, right? How often we use the very thing that joy should be eradicating, and we use that to try to find joy. Well, if you look real closely, you'll find that worry is not a method of the scientific method. It is not a step in a 12-step program of discovering self-worth. It's not a part of a 3-part sermon on finding contentment. It's not a step in the stepping stones to raising children. It is not a fruit of the Spirit, and it is also not one of the covenants of Christian conduct. Worry is the result of the hard work of destroying rather than building up. Destruction is hard work that leaves you, in the end, with nothing. And if you've ever tried to dismantle something, a house or a shed or a vehicle or something where you're just trying to dismantle it, it's hard work. It's laborsome work. It's difficult work. It's dangerous work sometimes. But in the end, what are you left with? Nothing. That's what worry does. Building is a tedious work as well, but in the end, it leaves you with a place of refuge, a home. Charles Spurgeon, once again, was emphasizing to his class the importance of making the facial expression harmonize with one's speech. When you speak of heaven, he said, let your face light up. Let it irradiate with heavenly gleam. Let your eyes shine with reflective glory. But when you speak of hell, well, then your ordinary face will do. It's funny, but at the same time, as I walk through the halls of God's missional outposts, the churches, listening to the murmurs of conversations, few, if any, I would think, contemplating the finality of hell, I see many ordinary faces. And perhaps on any given day, I see several faces that are, well, less than ordinary. Sing the praises of God. Shout for joy to God, all the earth. Sing the glory of his name. Give to him glorious praise. Say to God, how awesome are your deeds. So great is your power that your enemies come cringing to you. All the earth worships you and sings praises to you. They sing praises to your name. Come and see what God has done. He is awesome in his deeds toward the children of man. He turned the sea into dry land. They passed through the river on foot. There did we rejoice in him, who rules by his might forever, whose eyes keep watch on the nations. Let not the rebellious exalt themselves. Bless our God, O peoples. Let the sound of his praise be heard. Who has kept our souls among the living and has not let our feet slip? For you, O God, have tested us. You have tried us as silver is tried. Trials led to abundance. You brought us into the net. You laid a crushing burden on our backs. You let men ride over our heads. We went through fire and through water. Yet you have brought us out to a place of abundance. I will come into your house with burnt offerings. I will perform my vows to you, that which my lips uttered and my mouth promised when I was in trouble. I will offer to you burnt offerings of fattened animals. With the smoke of the sacrifice of rams, I will make an offering of bulls and goats. Come and hear, all you who fear God, and I will tell you what he has done for my soul. I cried to him with my mouth, and high praise was on my tongue. If I had cherished iniquity in my heart, the Lord would not have listened. But truly, God has listened. He has attended to the voice of my prayer. Blessed be God, because he has not rejected my prayer or removed his steadfast love from me. A.W. Tozer says this: George Mueller would not preach until his heart was happy in the grace of God. Ian Rubrick would not write while his feelings were low, but would retire to a quiet place and wait on God till he felt the spirit of inspiration. It is well known that the elevated spirits of a group of Moravians convinced John Wesley of the reality of their religion and helped to bring him a short time later to a state of true confession. And here is what I want you to hear. The Christian owes it to the world to be supernaturally joyful. The Christian owes it to the world to be supernaturally joyful. There are so many reasons to be depressed, and this morning, the sermon that I have studied is actually straight out of Ecclesiastes. There are many reasons to be depressed, and Solomon is not shy to identify as many as he can. And so we're going to walk through Ecclesiastes as quickly as we can, and we're going to lament a little bit. So we're going to take a practical approach to it, Ecclesiastes. So first, if you're feeling depressed or angry, I would like you to start this morning by bucking the system that immediately calls you to write a list of everything that you are thankful for, thinking that this will suddenly right your mind and get you to a spot of well-thinking. It'll help you to forget that you have cancer. It might help you to forget that your house just burned down or you lost your job. It might help you forget that your kids are dreadfully disobedient, or perhaps that you just lost a child. As a matter of fact, let's loosen up a little and let's do a little practice as a church. Instead of us declaring all of the wonderful things that God has done, let's start by making a list. I just want you to shout out all the terrible injustices of the world. Let's start by talking about the things that are real, that are really going on around us. And it's not hard. I mean, I flipped open my iPad this morning, and my finger always hovers when I don't know quite where to go. My finger always hovers over the news button, and I touched the news button. And of course, popped up, what was the first thing that I saw? Did anybody look at the news this morning? Anybody? There was a shooting in Wisconsin last night at a prom, a high school prom. So somebody came by with a rifle and started shooting, and the cops got the guy and that kind of stuff. But it happened, and 3 people were injured. Nobody was killed, thankfully, but it was just the first thing you see was tragedy. And this is the reality of the world that we live in. So for just a moment, please join with me, and we'll just shout out and say it like you experience it. Say it like you feel it when you read those news articles. Say it like you mean it. What are some of the terrible injustices of the world? You kind of sound like you don't mind. Don't these things kind of make you angry? Aren't they kind of depressing? What about the terrible genocide, the 50 million lives that have been lost, little babies and abortion? Doesn't that make you mad? Doesn't that frustrate you? Say them like you mean them. Good. You know, Solomon was the wisest man who ever lived. And when I was studying Solomon, the first thing that came into my mind was, I know lots of really smart people. I know lots of people that are really well studied, and people that I don't like being in the room with because they make me feel awkward. People that know how to win arguments, people that know their stuff. They know the facts, they know the dates. And I appreciate all that, I really do. And there's a big part of me that wishes sometimes that I was that guy, that I had all those answers, that I could have a conversation with a person and just know that I could win that argument just off of the stuff that I know. But one of the things I know about most of those people is that, or if not all of those people, they have earned what knowledge that they have. They've gone to school, they've studied books, sometimes read thousands of books. They have studied very hard to become what they are. The thing that's interesting about Solomon is he asked for it. What he got was a package from God. When you join a university, you pay for a package from them, and they're going to elevate your knowledge to at least their level of knowledge, right? But when God talked to Solomon, or God gave him a package of knowledge, okay? And so what's interesting about this set of knowledge that was given to Solomon is it came directly from God. Like if I'm going to know something, like if I'm going to really figure something out, I would really like that information to come directly from God. Because then I can pretty much rely on that is the truth of the matter. That is the final answer to any of life's questions. And so God gave Solomon this wisdom, and it was directly from God. So one of the things that I believe about Solomon's wisdom is that we can trust it. Now, Solomon got really excited because as he got this knowledge from God, what knowledge tends to do, it's that question of how much is enough? Like how much money is enough? $10 more? $50,000 more? How many toys are enough, kids? Just one more? Just one more toy, right? Knowledge is the same way. It's something that we get that it really makes us feel fulfilled. Like when I study a sermon and I've studied through and at the end I feel like I've really landed on some good points for my life or my family, I feel kind of fulfilled in that. And it does kind of launch me to this new place where it's like, I want more. Just if I could just learn one more thing about God, or if I could just learn one more thing about whatever it is that a person might be studying. And so knowledge drives us the same way having stuff drives us. And so there are those people that it's not necessarily the end game, but it's just about having more and craving more. One of the things I want us to consider about Ecclesiastes, too, is that it's considered a book of lament from Solomon, and it's kind of a downer when you read through it, yet it has made it into the most important collective piece of literature that was ever written, and that book is considered by most to be the inspired word of the living God. So again, just reiterating that this section of Scripture is valuable to us. There is some nuggets of wisdom in there that is supposed to govern how we behave and how we live. So we're going to take a quick flyby of Ecclesiastes and find out why, in fact, I believe it's one of the most encouraging and joyful books in the Bible. And I was talking to Dave this morning. This is my bucket of information, and that's how I'm looking at it. Because as I went through this, here's one of the things I'm going to encourage you to do. Ecclesiastes is not a good book to read in chunks, I've discovered, okay? It's 12 chapters long. It takes, depending on your reading, I'm a pretty slow reader, but if you listen to it on the Bible app, it takes about a half an hour to listen to the whole thing, like 27 minutes. So if you carve out the time, I would say go from beginning to end and take the whole thing in one chunk. Okay, so if you flip to the middle of Ecclesiastes and read, 2 verses or a chapter, you're just going to walk away depressed. Because it really has a flow to it that needs to be heard from beginning to end. So I'm encouraging you to get your Bible app open or get your audio Bible. I know, Pastor, do you still have it on cassette tapes? No. 8-track. Right. So anyways, get them out, put it in, and take a listen to the whole thing beginning to end. And listen to the flow. Listen to the wisdom of Solomon as he lays out for us the joy of the Lord through so much lament. So let's start real quick. I want to point out a couple things for you to listen for as we work through this. First off is the word meaningless. Vanity of vanities. You hear that all through there. As a matter of fact, you're going to hear it about 38 times, or you will hear it about 38 times in Ecclesiastes where he's saying this is meaningless. And the word in Hebrew is hebel, and it just simply means vapor, to breathe. Okay, it's not necessarily a negative term, and so the context that we kind of end up plugging into with English immediately sounds kind of negative, but it's kind of a neutral term. It's just kind of taking our understanding of meaningless, but putting it into a timeline to observe something just as a vapor. Like it has a time period, it has a beginning and it has an end. Okay, just like a breath or a vapor, it comes and it goes quickly, and there's not necessarily a lot of meaning to it. It's not necessarily negative, it's just saying that it has no eternity to it. The other things I want to point out is the phrase under the sun or under the heavens. It's actually 33 times through the book. It's the second thing you'll see the most of is this under the sun. And under the sun is going to be referring to anything that is happening physically in the world. The toils of man. It's going to be taking a look at the actual physical labor that we do. And then I'll get to the other one in just a minute. I'm going to read the first chapter, if you want to turn with me to Ecclesiastes 1. I'm going to read the first chapter just so you can get kind of the taste of what Ecclesiastes is like. The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What do people gain from all of their labors at which they toil under the sun? And that is one of the questions that we will aim to answer this morning. Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning to its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place where streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye has never enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again, and what has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? It was here already long ago. It was here before our time. No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. The teacher was king over Israel and Jerusalem. I applied my mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. What a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. I have seen all things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, look, I have increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me. I have experienced much of wisdom and knowledge. Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly. But I learned this too is a chasing after the wind. For with much knowledge comes much sorrow, and more knowledge, with more knowledge, the more grief. So again, this idea of the more a man knows, the more he wants to know, and just like money, just like toys, how much is enough? And so Solomon starts off by just laying out this idea of that everything seems to not have a meaning or a purpose. Like it just kind of happens and that it ends and everything ends up the way it was before. When we jump into chapter 2, Solomon, being a rich man, decides he's going to do a case study. So he decides, I'm going to pour myself into everything that's pleasurable. But of course, in the name of science. So, although we know that this was actually the undoing of Solomon, is his study of pleasure. I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness, and what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. So good Solomon took it upon himself to indulge every ounce of his flesh with every ounce of his money to determine, is there anything good under the sun for man to do? Is there anything that man can engage that will fill him and give him purpose and meaning? And so he does that. And in the end, here's what he says. This is 16 in chapter 2. For the wise, like the fool, will not long be remembered. The days have already come when both have been forgotten. Like the fool, the wise too must die. So he does all this, and his observation is, in the end, is it all perishes. We all die. Okay? I'm going to read this next section. It's starting in 17, and it goes to 23. And listen again that it uses the phrase under the sun several times. So I hated life, because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish. Yet they will have control over all of the fruit of my toil, which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. So my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labor under the sun. For a person may labor with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then they must leave all they own to another who has not toiled for it. This too is meaningless and a great misfortune. What do people get for all the toil and anxious striving with which they labor under the sun? All their days their work is grief and pain. Even at night their minds do not rest. this too is meaningless. If you read through the first 2 chapters of Ecclesiastes and you relate, that's okay. But I got to say, that is not the life that the Christian is meant to experience. If this has been your experience up until this point and being a Christian, and you have, like Solomon, wondered, what is the point of all this? Why is it so hard? And thankfully, maybe you didn't have the money to go out and try to experience it all and see if maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I'll try one more thing. But there's nothing out there under the sun that is going to satisfy us. And so the question is, then, well, where do we go from there? The next line, verse 24, a person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. This too, I see, is from the hand of God. So, Solomon refers to this under the sun 33 times, and it becomes quite clear to me that Solomon's ecclesiastical observation of life is being divided into 2 realms. The first one is the physical, and the second one is a combination of the physical and the eternal. So tangibly, Solomon observes labor and its reward. Like the actual engagement of labor, he engages that. And the actual engagement of life, physically, he engages those things, and he comes to these observations that are very tangible. And the first one is, in the strictly physical sense, is that labor is unavoidable. That in the world that we live in order to exist, in order to survive, we're going to have to labor. Whether you live in a faraway country where just every day is survival, and your labor is not to earn a check in which you can buy food, but just to go out and scavenge to try to keep yourself alive, life requires us to labor, to be at work. And so that, just in the physical sense, is what Solomon observed. 2, it is rewarded unfairly. So just in the physical sense, the observation is that when we toil, the rewards of it are unfair. I mean, just consider our system, right? I love baseball. I love watching baseball, but it still drives me nuts that last year, or this year, making over $100 million this year. Probably like 20. Like 20 pitchers in the major leagues are making like over $100 million. That's their package, right? And what do? They throw a little ball, harder than the rest of us, but that's what they do. That's their toil under the sun. And their reward is great. It's huge, right? And then you have the teacher, whose labor is intensive. It's not necessarily a gift that was just given to them. They have had to go to school. They had to invest their money initially into that. They've had to labor hard to become a good teacher. And we all know our children's good teachers. And what do they make? Like high end, maybe 60,000. Around here, probably more like 36. I don't know. I'm guessing. Am I close, Laurel? Somewhere in there. It doesn't matter. I mean, let's just compare it to 200 million or 100 million. I mean, it's not fair. It doesn't make any sense. So just in the physical sense, if we compare some of the different labors, the toils under the sun, the reward is not fair. It doesn't make sense, right? And look at some of our government officials, what they're making and how they're regulating and those kind of things. And then look at your own checkbook and tell me what you think. So the reward is unfair. It doesn't make sense to us. And the third one, the third tangible observation, is that all rewards and their receivers, what? Perish, die, go away. They return to the ground from whence they came. That its end, there's a finality to it. It's over, right? So, just from strictly physical sense, why would you not lament? Why would you not be full of sorrow? Why would you not live life in a way that causes you just to daily be depressed and frustrated about the way of things? It is not fair, the physical world. Now, if we shift our observation, because we certainly live in a physical world, right? Can't get out of that. So we live in this physical world, but if we marry it up to also an eternal understanding of things, well, things kind of shift a little bit. Just a little bit. But it's enough to open the door for what we're looking for here. The first thing, all the above tenets, the observations still hold true. Okay, when we talk about the physical world, married up to the eternal world, all those first things, labor is unavoidable, it's rewarded unfairly, and all rewards and their receivers perish. Those things are all still true. But eternity adds on one more thing. To the one who trusts God, there is an abundant eternal reward that in turn makes the labor itself a joy. It's kind of like exercise. If you've ever met one of those exercise fanatics that they're just always running, they're just always eating the right thing, and you just look at their life and you just think, vanity of vanities. Like, how miserable. Go eat a Big Mac, for crying out loud, right? I mean, look where we try to draw our, that's drawing joy in buckets instead of drawing it how we should be drawing it. So you look at these people, they exercise, and they're trying to accomplish something in themselves. They're trying to become better and healthier and those kind of things. But you often find the people that are really into exercise, what do they love? They love exercise. They love the process. They love going to the gym. They love making themselves sweat. They love hurting when they're running down the road. They have found in their toil a joy just in doing it. It's not about the end game necessarily. Like, there's a benefit there, but they just like it. They just like that torture. That's the torture that they've fallen in love with, right? We've all got tortures that we fall in love with, but that's theirs. And so they're enjoying the process of moving towards a purpose. What do the workers gain from their toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I know there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, and that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. That is a gift from God. So this is the other thing that you'll see 6 or 7 times throughout Ecclesiastes, and I'll go through and I'll read them each. So I saw that there is nothing better for a person than to enjoy their work, because that is their lot. And as you observe this little section of Scripture, this little point that he's pointing out, he continues to lament. He continues to point out all the physical things that are happening that just are not fair. And he goes on, this is what I observed to be good, that it is appropriate for a person to eat and drink and to find satisfaction in their toilsome labor under the sun during the few days of life God has given them. For this is their lot. When God gives someone wealth and possession and the ability to enjoy them, to accept their lot and be happy in their toil, this is a gift from God. I printed out the whole book. So I commend the enjoyment of life, because there is nothing better for a person under the sun than to eat and drink and be glad. Then joy will accompany them in their toil all the days of the life God has given them under the sun. Go, eat your food with gladness and drink your wine with a joyful heart, for God has already approved what you do. Always be clothed in white and anoint your head with oil. Enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of this meaningless life that God has given you under the sun. All your meaningless days, for this is your lot in life, and in your toilsome labor under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. And then we have several more pages of lament and just observation of what's going on under the sun. So then it comes to this, which is a great ending to any book in the Bible. I wish they all ended like this. Did anybody read the subheading of the last chapter, just before verse 9? Last chapter in Ecclesiastes. You're all getting there. Catching up. Anybody have a little subheading there? I do. The conclusion of the matter, which is always something you guys enjoy with sermons. The conclusion of the matter. Here's what it comes to, Solomon says, in all his lamenting and in all his searching through to find something that he could put his hand to change what he's doing, thinking that changing the thing might cause me some greater joy, or having this over here might cause me some greater joy. Back in, I think, chapter 2 or 3, he goes through and he lists all the things that he did. I planted gardens. I had female and male servants. I had singers. I had a harem. I had more cattle than anyone else had ever had. I had great palaces that I built for myself. I mean, he was trying everything. What is it that will bring me joy, was his wondering. And then he moves to the end, and this is his conclusion of the matter. Not only was the teacher wise, but he also imparted knowledge to the people. He pondered and searched out and set in order many proverbs. The teacher searched to find just the right words, and what he wrote was upright and true. And the reason we can trust that that is the case, because Solomon's wisdom came from the Lord, right? The words of the wise are like goads, their collected sayings like firmly embedded nails, given by one shepherd. Be warned, my son, of anything in addition to them. Of making many books, there is no end, and much study wearies the body. Now, all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Up until this point, Solomon has told us that it's just good for you to enjoy the labor. It is good for you to eat and drink and enjoy the labor. And living in our culture, that could be quickly pushed over to the side where we think, well, then I need to have more money. I guess to enjoy my labor means to enjoy what I get out of my labor. No, it means to enjoy your labor, whether you get a check for it or not. Whatever your hand finds to do it with all your might. Do it as unto the Lord. I mean, we could walk through the whole Bible and still see how God says, enjoy this, enjoy what you're doing. It doesn't make sense. What's interesting is that it all would have made sense had sin not come into the world. So think the same way. Continue forward the same way. Sin will affect you, but enjoy what it is that you're doing. But when he comes to the conclusion of the matter, he doesn't use the same sentences that he's been using. He sums it up in one way. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. So my question was, how can you enjoy something that is limited and perishing? If my labor is limited and perishing, if it's not actually accomplishing anything, you know, if whatever job you have, think about it. What is the end game? What is it trying to accomplish? Perhaps you're a builder, building houses. That will perish one day. The labor that we toil under the sun, all of that stuff is perishing. So how can you enjoy something that is limited and perishing? Well, if what is limited and perishing will in fact give way to that which is neither of those things? Okay, because we're an eternal people, when we think of limited and perishing, when we think of something that's going to have an end, because we're eternal, we don't think of that as the end of the story. We just think of it as a bump, as a hiccup, as a little thing in the matter. And so it's interesting to me how often we struggle against death, this looming thing that's coming towards us. And for us, it's like, I have to accomplish everything that I can to make a name for myself before this thing that I can't avoid gets here, as though that is the end. But as Christians, that's not us. That's not how we should behave. That's the hiccup. That's the victory, that death, that thing that is coming, because it gives way, all of it will give way to something that is much more valuable, and more important than that, something that is eternal. And that is the thing that should drive us. So how do we enjoy something that's limited and perishing? Well, we recognize that, in fact, it gives way to that which is neither of those things. I liken it to my children when we travel to visit my parents. You know, it's a long drive. It's 2 hours for a kid. It's a long drive, 2 or 3 hours drive. And for them to be cooped up in the car, it's boring, you know, and thankfully we got the flip-down DVD player now. But before that, there was just nothing to do. It was kind of a toilsome labor. But it's very interesting as you observe children in an environment like that. Sometimes you'll hear them whistling. Sometimes you'll hear them humming and they're talking, and there seems to be a joy about them. And so I wonder why. Why are they so happy? It's because they're not worried about the journey, because they know the journey is giving way to something much better. That they get to go visit Nana and Papa. Right? In the labor there is joy because they know what's coming. They know what they get to be part of. We need to behave the same way with our God. Practically speaking, I guess if you need something more practical, joy is our preparation for what is to come. It is our indicator of whether or not we are ready to take that journey to eternity. If you're not a person that regularly is experiencing joy, no matter what your situation, that might be an indicator you're not quite ready to get over that little speed bump death. That might be an indicator that you need to search the scriptures. And you need to come to this conclusion that no matter how many chapters of lament you can write about your current situation or about how life is treating you or how the thing that you've invested in so deeply is just not playing out how you want it to, joy is still available. Why don't you have it? Why are we continuing to try to fill with buckets what could hold oceans? And we're not a people that's meant to be filled up. We're people who are meant to overflow. And when we go out into our community, and I would say on any given Sunday, when we walk into this room, we should just be spilling over onto each other. Like if I've woken up in the morning and I'm having a bad day, your joy should be intoxicating to me. I should be driven to have whatever it is that is pouring off of you. This environment should just fill up so quickly with the Holy Spirit, with the presence of God. And it's because, too, in the midst of the journey, in the toilsome labor with which you've been given under the sun, you have these people beside you to love you and to support you and to guide you. And to not take advantage of that is a great loss. And so I want to encourage you to read Ecclesiastes. Because if eternity is pure, we toil to be pure. If eternity is just, we toil to be just. If eternity is holy, we toil to be holy. If eternity is sin-free, we toil to be sin-free. One last look in the scripture. Turn to Matthew 6, 19 through 21, and I'm going to close with this. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Father, I just come before you this morning very thankful for this journey that you've taken me on through Ecclesiastes. And Lord, my studies aren't done. I believe that there's more there to find. But one of the things that I have discovered is joy is in the journey. God, it's not moving towards a physical end and what I accomplish here, because none of that makes sense. And none of it is fair or right. And we know that's not your fault. That's caused by our sin. And Lord, because there's so much of it in the world, one man may suffer because of another man's sin. And that's not fair. But in the scheme of things, God, you are recreating a new heaven and a new earth. You are recreating a new dwelling place for us. God, you are not just fixing what's been broken, but God, you are creating something new and fresh. And we are moving towards a joy that is eternal. We are moving towards a joy that is unfathomable. And if God were to be the people you called us to be, we must fix our eyes on that and that alone. And I pray, Lord, that your Spirit would be heavy on us until we do. God, don't let us slip into the trap of valuing the things of this world that are perishing more than we value the things that are eternal. Your Son paid way too high a price for us to desire things that are perishing. And God, in that endeavor, I pray that we would be a church who demands that of each other. God, that we would not let the person sitting across from us dwell or wallow in their depression or frustration, but that we would drag them kicking and screaming into our joy. God, that we would settle for nothing less. And God, as we toil under the sun and the things that the rest of the world is going to cry over, I pray that we would be rejoicing. And that the world would look to us and say, I don't understand, but whatever you got, I want it. And Lord, I pray that we wouldn't be faking that. Cancer hurts. Death is sad. Feelings are real. So we can't avoid those things, God, but we can certainly live through them. We can certainly have joy in the midst of adversity. And God, we find that when we choose to set you up as our King, and we choose to trust you, fear you, and obey your commands. In the midst of that, we'll find true joy, I have no doubt. Thank you for Solomon and his wisdom. Lord, we thank you for the life that he lived, and pray that we would live a better one, that our ending would be better than his, that we could leave behind us a legacy for our children that would give them the same joy that we live inside of. Now, as we move on in worship, Lord, I pray that you would call out of us a spirit of worship. God, that as you have created us, and by sitting silently in our seats, our cells, our molecules, our DNA declares your glory, let it pour out of our mouths. Let it be seen in our faces as we express what heaven is going to be like. And that at the remainder of this service, that you would be lifted up in a way that you have not been lifted up before. God, we are so thankful of your grace. And we ask these things in Christ's name. Amen.
Okay, this morning we are celebrating, as you can see by the balloons here, we are celebrating things eternal, things that have happened. One is family. And inside of our family this year, we have had 20 baptisms. It's time to cheer. Lori's going to tell us another thing to cheer about.
So, as you know, we're a missional church, the Church of the Nazarene, and this year, when they went to celebrating missions, or celebrating generations, we learned that Moscow Church of the Nazarene gave 123% of their giving, missions giving. So not 100%, 23% above that. So we want to celebrate that and thank you for your generous giving, and thank God for giving us the funds to do that. So we want to celebrate that.
Stay tuned for more things